Right, this is mostly a bit of what culture nostalgia here, and purely for Scott who's hanging around in the back there. What is the one album we have banned in the What Culture office because we listened to it so much in 2016?
The Offspring album?
No, Guardians of the Galaxy Awesome Mix Volume 1. We had it on every single day on repeat for about a year when we first moved into this office because it is the greatest movie soundtrack of all time. Spirit in the Sky, banger. Moon Age Daydream, banger. Hooked on a Feeling, banger. Fooled Around, Come Get Your Love, Fooled Around and Fell in Love, Cherry Bomb, like it's just every one after the other, and it's so fitting for that film because the whole thing's Peter Quill gets abducted from Earth and he's got this little mixtape with him and it's all the things that tie him to his family and to his home, blah, 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 but it's all just pulled right out of the 60s and the 70s, and it's some of the just finest slices of Americana, some of the most iconic tracks that came out of those many, many years, and it's just class. I love it. And we can't listen to it in the office because whenever it goes on, somebody goes, "This again!" Because we had it on so much.
It's the Ooga Chaka, Ooga Chaka, Ooga Chaka.
Can I get an Ooga Chaka?
No.
Pathetic.
Right, so I approached this question when we were having a little brainstorm about it, thinking we were talking about OSTs. So thinking of original music, composers, nice, lovely things that we could talk about and celebrate all that sort of original film music, and had a lovely spiel prepared about Ramin Djawadi. I got that right first try. This didn't take more than one take.
Ramin Djawadi.
So I had a lovely spiel prepared about Ramin Djawadi because he's the guy behind ultimately the best film soundtrack of all time, which is Pacific Rim, which is the most bopping, slapping track that you'll ever get in a film. It probably comes on, I'm like, yes, sort of stomping around to it. That Warcraft as well. He's done he's done all of the Game of Thrones soundtracks for each season. He's done Prison Break, he's done Westworld, he's done everything. I put it on and I play board games to it. He's the guy who always comes on when you've got some like ambience, atmospheric thing to do. He is fantastic. But I can't have him because we're talking about actual soundtracks. So I've got to, obviously, all the good ones have been said, so I've got to shout out to my guilty pleasure, which is the Pick of Destiny soundtrack by Tenacious D, because that is an absolute bopper. I love the Pick of Destiny film. It was a piece of shit, but it's still a good time, and I love Jack Black and his sense of humour, and every song just absolutely hammers that home. So you start off with like Kickapoo, and by the end you get the Pick of Destiny, which is a bop, and then it finishes with the metal as well, and the metal is arguably Tenacious D's best song ever, and it's on Guitar Hero, so good. But yeah, everything about that soundtrack is just a good time, so it embodies the Tenacious D energy very well and puts a visual piece to it. So yeah, Pick of Destiny would be my pick for best soundtrack.
What's the best movie soundtrack?
Straight Outta Compton. It's NWA.
What's the best movie soundtrack, Ewan?
I have a lot of favourite movie soundtracks because I tend to discover music by that kind of way. It's kind of like the most basic take I can ever have, but I always love best ofs and like compilations because you tend to get the best all-round view of a specific genre or, record label or whatever. And Tarantino is a big fan of his movie soundtracks. Obviously, he has a great one in Reservoir Dogs. Everyone will point out Pulp Fiction. And then, later on in kind of Kill Bill and Inglourious and Django Unchained, he kind of looked back at all the composers. But for my money's worth, the best Tarantino soundtrack is Jackie Brown, because that is just such a wonderful, soulful mix of R&B, funk, and soul, and it just all comes together in this brilliant kind of it all serves a purpose. And my favourite bit in that film is also a homage to The Graduate, which is where the titular Jackie Brown is coming in through the airport to Bobby Womack's Across 110th Street, and it's this wonderful song about overcoming adversity and getting to the other side of the line while she's moved across the airport, and it's just so brilliant. There are so many great songs in there. You have the Delphonics, you have Strawberry Letter 23, which is, oh God, I love that song so much. And Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time? It's a fantastic song. Even Pam Grier's on it as well, which is great. So yeah, even though Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction both have great soundtracks, I do think Jackie Brown, the film itself, the soundtrack is very underrated and deserves another listen. So there we go.
This is hard, right? Because you want to do the whole collection of songs versus score, and my mind went to Jurassic Park, which doesn't count because we're going for songs. So, with that proviso, it has to be the soundtrack that as soon as you put it on, the whole movie is encapsulated, and every single song that's on that soundtrack, it's Top Gun.
Oh!
Because I don't care about outdated, it's the cheesiest thing in the world, but I absolutely adore it. I have such a soft spot for 80s cheese, whether it be glam rock or anything, just the whole 80s, synth-based stuff and whatever. And there's something about, especially retrospectively or romanticized today when you look back at the 80s, the idea that everyone was just kind of floating by on a cloud of their own bull, and it was like, it just kind of just, you know, that translated into a lot of the genres as well. And I just, like I said, I think that the reason that I adore Top Gun, it's more about what it represents than necessarily it is as a film. There's like a whole part of that movie that haven't aged very well and whatever, but it is that 80s panache, it's that over the top, it's 80s bull in a movie, and I think the soundtrack is that too. And it gave us Danger Zone, and like in things like Mighty Wings and Playing with the Boys, and like just and it's got a Top Gun theme on it as well. And you put any song from that thing on. There's a one called like Hot Summer Nights, and like just all that. It's terrible, but it's also absolutely phenomenal. Everyone knows every word of every song that's on that thing too. And just yeah, I'd love someone to contend that it's not the greatest thing that humanity's ever done, really.
How many times have you been playing GTA 5?
Yep.
Smashed on Danger Zone while you were in one of the fighter jets?
Speaking of, well, yeah, I mean, when is Danger Zone not on 24/7 when I'm walking to work? But still, if I'm going to talk about Danger Zone, check out the Children of Bodom version, which is just a nice screamy version of it, where he's just going Danger Zone. If you want, you know, something a little bit different. But yeah, 80s cheese served up nice and fresh. It's Top Gun. It just doesn't age, apart from when it's aged. It's aged, but it's really good.
The best movie soundtrack is American Pie. The first one. In fact, all the American Pie movies have got excellent soundtracks, but the first one in particular is just outstanding. That whole movie is sort of like a zeitgeist film for everybody who saw it at the right age. It was about the agony of being a teenager and wanting to have sex with everything, as we can all probably sympathise with.
A long time ago, that.
Yes, unfortunately, I don't know what you're trying to say. And the movie, the music that came with it was all sort of it was pop punk infused, and it was great. It was really charming. It sort of suited the characters as well, because you would think that they would think they were cool and would listen to that kind of music when they just weren't, and it sort of stuck out that way. And even now, I can sit and listen to that whole album all the way through, and it sort of evokes all of the moments, the best moments in those films, which is the best thing about a movie soundtrack, because it's not just an album that you're listening to, it's an experience that goes along with the film, and it's just perfect in that respect.
So, the best movie soundtrack ever goes along with 2009's best rom-com comedy romantic film, 500 Days of Summer. It is amazing. There's a scene in it where Tom, played by the amazing Joseph Gordon-Levitt, gets laid, and they play You Make My Dreams Come True, and he just dances down the street, just like that. Everybody comes out with the trumpets and stuff and plays along with him just because he gets sex. And this entire soundtrack is just to do with that. And then he meets her, to begin with. He meets her by playing the Smiths really loud on his headphones, and she can hear that, and she falls in love with him. And I just think, what? That's just amazing, and I like it. That's my answer.
Hands down, it's got to be Trainspotting. Now, for me, like, music is always secondary. I mean, that might be a bad thing for people, but especially in films, I don't really like it unless it's like a good score. I don't really like any of those words in my songs during films. But for me, Trainspotting, just from the get-go, Iggy Pop's Lust for Life, Mark Renton running down the high street, and each segment of the film is carried by these individual songs and artists. Can't always remember off by heart, so I'm just gonna look at my phone here for a second. So, Atomic, when we get in there from Blondie, just brilliant, just the whole hyping up to the night out sort of thing. And then we go straight in there with Temptation. But as I'm trying to just put the point over, for me, each scene is just carried by these crucial songs, and especially at the very end with Born Slippy, just the whole thing of like, wait a minute, you can just turn everything around, and life doesn't have to be crap. Choose life, not drugs.
It's difficult, isn't it? Everyone said this, but it really is. I had about 10 coming in before I've started filming, so I need to fire out 2 honourable mentions. One is the Submarine EP soundtrack, all written and sang by Alex Turner of Arctic Monkeys fame. It fits with that movie so well. The other is the soundtrack for Gasparino's Climax, which will make you want to go out clubbing and then just never ever come home. But the one I'm going to talk about is the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World soundtrack, which is a bunch of songs by licensed artists, as well as a bunch of original tracks by Beck, as Sex Bob-omb, the band that Scott Pilgrim is in from the actual movie. In both of these different sets of tracks are very, very, very indie, which is almost, it's where my music taste kind of came from. Not only were the tracks themselves, the original songs by Beck, so good and so wrong, were exactly the kind of music you'd expect a pretty naff mid-tier indie band that everyone is in when they're in their late teens and early 20s to sound like, which is, you know, right up my street. But the actual tracks themselves, Plumtree did a few songs, not for the album, but they already had a song called Scott Pilgrim, which the graphic novel was inspired by and then ended up on the movie soundtrack, which is this weird link between all the different versions of Scott Pilgrim. But Plumtree are really good and really poppy and will put you in a good mood, no matter the mood you're in. Then there's a bunch of stuff on like Broken Social Scene. You've got the Rolling Stones on there, and all of it just fits either thematically with the movie or actually narratively with the film. There's a lot of songs about Ramona or being under the thumb, like the character is later on in the film, and it fits so well. In Edgar Wright, all of Edgar Wright's movies have a great musical heritage, but this one in particular, because it has those original tracks, I think is elevated to another level, because some of them are genuinely good. There's one called, I think, Summertime, that is awesome. And it sounds as good as any of the actual songs on that album, the proper ones. We are Sex Bomb.